Today, I am going to be teaching you about Holocaust art. To begin, the Holocaust was the state-sponsored persecution and mass murder of millions of European Jews, Romani people, the intellectually disabled, political dissidents, and homosexuals by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. The word Holocaust, from the Greek words holos, meaning whole, and kostos, meaning burned, was historically used to describe a sacrificial offering burned on an altar. The Holocaust was the foundation of anti-Semitism. Adolf Hitler was the dictator of Nazi Germany from 1933, where he rose to power as the Nazi Party leader to his suicide in 1945. The final solution was the organized and systematic mass murder of European Jews. The Nazi German regime implemented this genocide between 1941 and 1945. The impact the Holocaust had on art. Most importantly, the biggest artists of the Holocaust were the victims. But what made them turn to art? The victims of the Holocaust turned to art for many reasons. During the Holocaust, millions of Jewish children, teenagers, and adults were subjected to bone-breaking manual labor, brutal beatings, and morbid malnutrition in the ghettos and concentration camps across Eastern Europe. Although treated as animals by the Nazi dictatorship, many were reminded of their humanity through artistic mediums. From theater and music to painting and writing, art in all its forms gave imprisoned Jews a small outlet for self-expression in an environment that criminalized it. Art gave Jews an outlet for self-expression. It also gave them a sense of normalcy. In a world where Jews were taught they had no humanity, art gave them a sense of which they did. Another reason Jews turned to art is for documentation. Through art, future generations can learn about the terrible life Jews lived in the ghettos and camps. Each piece from a Jewish artist tells a story. Jews also turned to art because it was a way for Nazi officers to earn commissions. Although the Jewish artists would rarely receive commissions, they were better off on a Nazi officer's good side. Sometimes the Jews would receive food for their work. To also stay on the Nazis' good side, Jewish artists created propaganda for the Nazi Party, specifically the Terezin camp. The Terezin camp attracted a great deal of Bohemian and Moravian Jewish artists and creatives. However, the secret ghetto was merely a propaganda tool used to fool the world, its prisoners, and even the International Red Cross into thinking the Nazis were providing pleasant accommodations to willing Jews who excitedly flocked to Terezin from all over Europe. Jewish artists made this camp look like a joy. Between 1942 and 1944, the Terezin camp became a place for inspired and therapeutic artist expression. Terezin resident and accomplished artist Friedel, publicized at the time as an artist paradise by the reigning Nazi Party. The Terezin camp has since been regarded as the kingdom of deceit by its survivors. Decorated by facades of colorful coffee shops, happy houses, and seemingly cheerful children, Terezin's seemingly aesthetic appeal attracted a great deal of Bohemian and Moravian Jewish artists and creatives. Dicker Brandes taught drawing and painting classes, giving imprisoned Jewish children their only avenue to voice their feelings through art during the Holocaust. He taught the Terezin children to channel their emotions into their illustrations, which became a reflection of their dark days at the camp and high hopes of one day returning home. Their colorful yet haunting illustrations are now on display at the children's drawings from the Terezin Ghetto exhibition at the Jewish Museum in Prague. Although created for self-expression, the art from the Holocaust and Terezin was not always used for such. Brundibar, a musical composed and directed by Terezin prisoner Hans Krause, acted as the perfect ploy by the Nazis to paint Terezin as something it was not, a happy place with joyful residents. While Nazi officers collected a nice profit for each of its 55 performances, Brundibar's cast of Jewish children sang, whistled, and danced their troubles away only to meet cruel fates when they were no longer needed. A majority of the children imprisoned at Terezin were ultimately sent to their deaths at Auschwitz. During the Holocaust, several women were able to create art while in concentration camps. While some painted and drew clandestinely, others were commissioned by Nazis to create works in exchange for food. In their works, women artists combine elements such as idealization, realism, humor, satire, and irony, which bear witness to their desire to escape the world in which they found themselves. At the same time, their paintings and drawings reveal how they maintain their humanity and sensitivity despite the appalling conditions in which they lived. Common subjects and imagery include communal life, hygiene, and sanitation, barbed wire fences, and food. Many of the works produced were documentary in nature and concerned with commemoration of both the artist's situation and with memorializing the work's subjects. The communal life that the female prisoners were subjected to meant living not only in extremely crowded conditions, but also without any privacy. The feeling of suffocation and the lack of private space is depicted by Malva Szalek in the painting she produced. In many of the paintings Szalek produced, she depicted the activity or lack of it in the women's quarters. Sometimes she drew the interior as crowded and claustrophobic, with women and children lying or sitting on the triple layered bunks, surrounded by bundles and cases. In other works, she portrayed a woman or a few women sitting on the bed, knitting, reading, or lying down and resting in a tidy, almost homey room. Alongside kitchen utensils, pots and pans, ladles and bowls, she painted washing lines with washing on them and hooks on a wall with clothes, handbags, or other women's accessories hanging on them. One might expect these interiors to give a feel of warmth, but they create considerable tension between the extreme order and feminine tidiness and the figure themselves, who, despite the activities in which they are engaged, seem weary and void of feeling. Some Holocaust artists. Felix Nussbaum is just one of the artists from the Holocaust. Felix was a German artist living from 1904 to 1944. He was known as a new objectivity artist. This style offered a return to unsettlement, mental reality, and a focus on the objective world. Felix's famous works include The Refugee, The Great Disaster, Shore at Rapallo, View of Ostend with Boat, Camp Schnaug, Above the Roofs, and many other pieces he created. Felix Nussbaum was born in Osnabrück, Germany, and studied in Hamburg, Berlin, and Rome. In 1940, he was arrested like many others and sent to the camp of Saint Cyprien in southern France. Nussbaum managed to escape and lived in hiding in Brussels until he was caught in 1944 and sent to Auschwitz, where he perished. In his piece, The Refugee, a man sits slumped in a chair, his head buried in his hands in a gesture of utter despair. Next to him rests a walking stick and a bundle of belongings. A long table, bare except for a globe, dominates the room, which resembles a jail cell. Although an arched doorway bears trees can be seen, a flock of ravens circle overhead. The painting is a reflection of Nussbaum's fear and depression on the eve of the Second World War. As Germany's threatening shadow sweeps across Europe, the artist is left with no escape route. The desolation of the room signifies his helplessness, while the bleak view in the distance reflects grim reality. For the Jew, there is no refuge. Joseph Kauner was a Jewish artist from the time of the Holocaust, living from 1895 to 1967. He was known as a fine art painter and draftsman, a person who makes detailed technical plannings or drawings. Joseph's famous works include A Street in Lot's Ghetto, a self-portrait, A Girl with Flowers, Still Life with Apples, and Flowers in Vase. Many of his paintings had very bland names with little to no details. After the German occupation, Corner was interned in the Lotz ghetto where he worked in the textile workshop designing carpets. In 1944, he was deported to Auschwitz and then various forced labor camps. He was liberated from Ludwigslust After liberation, he settled in Sweden where he was a prolific artist. Counter spent lots of time in the Lotz ghetto, so one of his famous paintings is of a street in Lotz ghetto. He portrays the street with bright colors, but as I can imagine, it was quite the opposite. Counter could have portrayed the street this way to depict the life he yearns for. Boris Lurie was an American artist living from 1924 to 2008. Lurie's famous works include In Concentration Camp, Roll Call in Concentration Camp, Liberation of Magdeburg, and his self-portrait, which is untitled. Lurie was born in Leningrad, Russia, and raised in Riga, Latvia. Boris Lurie was taken prisoner by the Nazis at the age of 16 and imprisoned for 4 years in a series of labor and concentration camps, including the Riga Ghetto, Buchenwald, and Stuffhof. Lurie and his father were the only of the family to survive. After his liberation, Lurie and his father moved to New York City in 1946, and the younger Lurie began his career as an artist. Today, Lurie has his own foundation called the Boris Lurie Art Foundation. When Lurie passed in 2008, he had never sold a painting in his life and died worth $100 million. His painting, titled Roll Call in Concentration Camp, portrays a dark, swirling sky and rust-colored ground, featuring a lineup of tormented souls with their faces distorted beyond human recognition. This piece is very impactful and brings the disaster of the Holocaust to life. Some famous Holocaust art pieces. The Song is Over, painted by Pavel Fontel, lived from 1903 to 1945. This painting portrays Hitler as a clown. An instrument is on the floor, destroyed, which he played the melodies with blood on his hands. Hitler showed that he was sorry for himself before committing suicide. The instrument represents the Jewish population that he destroyed and the blood on his hands from him being responsible for it. Fontel, a doctor who was born in Prague in 1903, was able to paint secretly in the Theresienstadt ghetto in occupied Czechoslovakia, thanks to a Svet policeman who gave him the materials he needed. Rooftops in the Winter, painted by Moritz Müller, lived from 1887 to 1994. It depicts Theresienstadt snow-covered roofs as a peaceful scene. It shows no people, whereas the ghettos were totally overpopulated. The painting has multiple meanings. On the one side, it's a beautiful winter landscape, and on the other, there is a horror that exists behind it. Moritz Müller studied painting in Prague, later founding an auction house. It was forcibly closed after the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia. He produced over 500 works during his time in the Theresienstadt ghetto. Girls in the Field, painted by Nellie Toll, who lived from 1932 to 2021, portrays two little girls frolicking in a field. Nellie painted this as a child to depict the life she yearns for. She desired to have the freedom to live. Nellie Toll was a Polish-born American Jewish artist, writer, and teacher, and was a survivor of the Holocaust until 2021. Toll and her mother Rose were the only members of their family to survive the Holocaust and spent over 8 months in hiding during 1943 and 1944. Rear Entrance by Bedřich Freda, lived from 1906 to 1944, portrays a half-open gate in the darkness. The half-open gate is a metaphor for death because it shows there is only one way out, and that is into the darkness. He shows architecture and empty nature as a stage for an event that is itself invisible. Bedřich Freda was ordered to work in the graphics department in the Theresienstadt ghetto, creating Nazi propaganda. Due to the nature of his work, Freda and many of his colleagues were able to use the equipment they had at hand to document the horrific condition of life in the ghetto through paintings and drawings. Thank you for listening and learning more about the art in the Holocaust.